I was looking at the flame things.
Wednesday.
Wednesday, the
17th.
is,
Mr. Burrows, do you want the doors left open?
You don't have to. I think the reason it was open because we didn't have the key to keep it unlocked. I think Bryce was just trying to keep the door unlocked.
they can come in if they want to.
Y'all come Saturday night?
Yeah.
Are you ready?
Yes, sir.
It is 3 o'clock, so we will call the Finance Committee of the Brunswick-Glynn Joint Water Sewer Commission, Wednesday, May 17th, to order. Do we have a public comment?
No, sir.
All righty. We'll move into the approval agenda, please. Starting with item 1, the minutes from our last meeting.
I'll move to approve the minutes as presented.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor? Motion carries 3-0. Mr. Burrows, purchasing policy updates.
Yes, sir. If you recall, at the last meeting, we approved the annual fiscal year budget. And one of the things that was discussed as part of that budgeting process was the purchase of capital equipment items that were listed in the budget. The Finance Committee requested that staff bring back a policy to require the capital items to be brought back to the commission for approval prior to purchase. The current purchasing policy outlines, let me find the exact page here, on page 5 of 17, that capital items which are included and in the adopted budget, as long as they're under budget, do not require being brought back to the commission for approval. So, per the request of the commission, that section has been redlined to remove the phrase "and to purchase capital items." There are a couple of other lines that were changed to take the word county out of the name, as we have began doing across the board, to line up more with the legal name of the entity. And those are the only changes in the proposal of the purchasing policy. A couple things to keep in mind with this. The current policy, like I said, it's been in use for several years, I believe, since 2014. And if anything comes in over budget, we have previously brought that to you, but we've been fortunate to get purchases made under budget. We have not been bringing those to you unless it's a situation like the VATCons where we were required to secure financing to provide those. So, per the request, I have presented these. If there's any questions and or additional changes that you would like, we can discuss those.
So in summary, the new policy states that even if something is in the budget and it's approved once per year, when it comes time to purchase, it now comes back to the commission for approval.
That's correct.
Any?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. I've been reading this over, and I don't think that we need to do that, where we need to, every single capital purchase needs to come back to us. First of all, we approved the budget, which means we've approved the purchase of that item. As long as it remains under the amount that is allowed in the budget, I don't see any reason coming back to that. In addition to that, I think it's kind of important, and we even have our procurement director here, sitting there at work, of course, as usual. And, you know, the whole purchasing procedure here is very different. Even though the utility operates much like a private company, we're not here to make a profit. We are here to watch over the money that comes in and do the best job we can for everyone. And when we buy things, it's very standard that, first of all, you have to have three different quotes. Also, we have the ability to tag on to numerous other entities, government entities that have purchased the same equipment, and be able to tag onto their contracts. So if the city of Atlanta is buying, 300 vehicles, and at a certain price, we can buy a vehicle that would be similar to that contract at that price they do. So we have a big advantage that way. And I don't know, Pam, did you go to the University of Georgia? Oh, because you have a reputation as a bulldog, so I was just wanted to just double check on that. I know that. So when something comes in, request for purchase in your office, they have to provide you with 3 different quotes. Is that the standard procedure? It is, okay. And then.
They can't get 3 quotes, they kind of have to write out why they can't get 3 quotes.
Right. But, so single source vendors keep you awake nights, maybe. All right, so in other words, the procedure's in place, and I'm assuming that you get the 3 quotes and you still check anyway? Yes, of course. I worked for government for a government in South Florida for 10 years, and when I used to get quotes on computer equipment, one of my favorite places was there was a website called alwaysthebestprice.com. The only thing is it didn't always have the best price. So it was kind of interesting. But my finance director, who was my boss, really enjoyed looking at that. So, but I think if we decide we approve the budget, we authorize the purchase of this, that means every item that's $500 or more, we have to come back and
It's 5,000.
5,000 or more, and then we have to come back and approve that again. And the thing is, there may be opportunities come up where you can get something at a better price. The way pricing's going now, it's very difficult. The meters, I think, were the perfect example. If we didn't buy the meters when we did, the price increase was what percentage?
2 different times, 30% increases.
Right, so there's times when we have to rely on the director here to make some moves that are strategic for our organization. So I'm not comfortable with changing the policy and and it's like creating an additional level of bureaucracy here for some reason. So that's where I'm coming from.
So my stance is, and we'll hear from Commissioner Watson as well, but my stance is 100% agree there should be a minimum threshold. We should not have y'all bringing in $1 items, which we don't. Maybe 5,000 is not the right number. But at the same time, a budget's a guide. So if we put 100 items in the budget, in the capital budget, and we don't want to sit here on an annual basis and try to project out what we're going to need 11 months into the year. The whole point of the budget is a guide. That should not be a carte blanche approval for everything for the next year, all capital items. The whole point in bringing it back was, hey, conceptually, we agree with these items, but things change over the course of the year. Budgets change over the course of the year. Pricing changes over the course of the year. Amount of customers we have we don't want to approve something today and be stuck with it 11 months from now just because it's in a budget. So what this does, it gives us the opportunity 11 months from now to say, hey, is that still a piece of equipment we need for this fiscal year, or could it be kicked to a future fiscal year? I have worked in private industry my whole life, so my stance is a little bit different than the government model. But my experience, things change in business, and you need to be able to have the flexibility to be flexible. For example, and I wish we had the budget from this capital year. If we're not going to do this, there's some of those capital items that I'd have challenged and said, wait, do we really need these this fiscal year, or is this the right thing? And you don't have to pull it up; you're welcome to. But instead of talking about all those in detail, 11 months or at the beginning of the year, you talk about them in real time as they
that's not the
come
right
ready
one.
for purchase. And again, I do think there needs to be a minimal threshold there. I think $5,000 is certainly too low, but in June or May, if we say, hey, we're okay with this capital budget, and we see that it has a $500,000 piece of equipment in it, just because the price comes in at $494,000 doesn't mean that we just go buy it. We should have another shot to look at that and make sure that it still makes business sense at that time, or else we're going to be really chasing those items in the beginning of the year.
Well, Janice doesn't have permissions, so I can't pull it up. Well, actually, I can, because we got the last month's agendas on here.
I don't think there's any question that the manner in which we're purchasing the items is in question. I think we're getting the best price, and I think we're vetting out that process really well. I do think the question is, next February, do we need, or is there a better option? And I think it's more of a, consultative approach to buying equipment as opposed to, having a budget now and then Andrew and the team running with it for 12 months. So, but I do think, maybe 5 years ago, $5,000 was the right number. It's probably higher now.
That's our financial policy for capital purchases is $5,000.
Which makes sense. So I'm all in favor of having a capital threshold where you have signature approval. And frankly, I'm used to seeing that in organizations. Typically, typically there's two thresholds. You have a threshold of which the executive director, the president, can approve without any board approval. Then you have one that if it's already a line item, it doesn't come back. But then at some point, if it's a $140,000 item, because, how do we get to that 140? That's a nice round number.
The units are $70,000 a piece. We got quotes.
Exactly 70,000.
Yes, we
so
got
by
quotes.
definition, we're going to be in budget if they're exactly 70,000. Is what you're saying. But that's a $140,000 line item. That might change. It might not be needed at the time, or our business model might have changed at that point. So instead of going and waiting and buying these 11 months later, I think that should come back before the commission.
So I have a question then. So since it's in the budget, do we go ahead and follow the lead of our director and trust that he's going to decide whether or not it's necessary for the organization or whether it can wait? Or do we, the thing is, we're oversight. We're not day-to-day operations here. So well, I can't make a decision if Andrew says, okay, we need these, we have to get these this year because otherwise this is what's going to go on, or maybe I'll bump it out to next year. So I can't make that decision, but and even if he comes with information, I don't have the knowledge for the engineering end or what's necessary from the system. And I think that we need to put our trust in Andrew on what the decision is, or whether we need to make the purchase or not. When you do a budget, I don't think it's just off the wall. Just pick things out and say, oh, it's not like a wish list. These are things that they've identified, things that need to be done in the budget. they've prioritized things very clearly. I mean, in the whole budget process, people will request all sorts of things, and the budget committee sits down and says, yes, yes, no, no, no. And so, I mean, I think it's well thought out, and I think we're just adding a level of bureaucracy for us to go ahead and say, well, we're the ones that should make that decision about that. I think that
We're not
Andrew
making the decision,
needs
we're
to-
ratifying the decision.
Well, yeah, I know, but I mean, Andrew probably makes dozens of decisions a day, that are for the benefit of the utility without being ratified by us. So I mean, I think that maybe the threshold needs to change, but in something that's even $140,000, it's not maybe, it's a yes or no. Yes, we need them, or no, we don't need them now. I mean, I don't think it's just something that's,
I mean,
Play a devil's advocate, what is our capital infrastructure? I mean, what's our capital, budget this year?
for projects,
Not these type of things, but for projects.
projects right at 8 million.
So we got $8 million worth of projects, every single one of them's coming in here for approval.
Yes, well, if it's over $25,000
Yeah, it's
for
over
the contract,
25.
right.
So we have a threshold, that's my point, we have a financial threshold, we say anything over that. We're not just saying, hey, this was approved, we approved $8 million, Andrew, go forth. And it's not a trust issue, I mean, it's a board oversight issue, I mean, it's not a lack of trust, it's not like you said, it's not that we got bad policies, it's just that, we need to have discussions throughout the course of the year to make sure that we're making the right decisions in real time as a utility, not necessarily as a board or at the executive level, but as a group. That's my opinion.
It appears to me, excuse me, it appears to me to be an unnecessary level of redundancy. I mean, when we present the budget, a lot of work goes into the budget, so we're presenting things that we need, and we give the explanations to the commission, and the commission approves the need and the spending. If something is approved and in the budget, that does not mean that we have to spend it. If we get further into the following year and our financial situation changes, and even if the item or service itself is the same price or even less, obviously if it's not in our best interest to do that project at that time, we wouldn't do it. And of course, per our current procedures, if it comes time to do that or purchase that item, and it's more than what was approved in the budget, then we come back for approvals on that. So I don't see any real benefit to the extra level of redundancy that you're.
I don't see it as lower redundancy. If anything, I see it as more efficient, because instead of sitting here and vetting all these 12 months from now, and y'all having to make a business case for these, you're saying, hey, here's what we believe we're gonna need over the course of the year. And it's almost at that point, it's at the beginning of the year, saying, that makes sense conceptually, we agree to this, versus us vetting every one of these items at budget time. Because we didn't do that. We didn't vet every one of these items at budget time. We didn't talk about these in great length. We had a high level look at them, but we didn't talk about the business case analogy. We didn't talk about an ROI. We didn't talk about other options and opinions at that point in time. And it's too early to do so, right? Because, we're not buying them yet. It's just a high level budget at this point. And I'd be very surprised if the numbers that we're getting at the time are still good 11 months from now down to the exact dollar. If so, they were probably inflated at budget time. So, I have no issue with saying, hey, we believe it's $140,000 for these units. Do y'all conceptually approve that? We put it into a budget, and then at the end of the year, when you get ready to buy it, you come back and say, hey, it was actually 146. Okay, that's what they cost. That's what they cost. Assuming we've done all the checks and balances like you are, like you're saying. It's not that I'm challenging. I'm not even challenging anything. I'm saying I believe a business should have a process where at the beginning of the year, a budget is a guide, and then you have purchasing thresholds that throughout the course of the year, you follow a standard.
The other thing is, if we go with the $140,000 example, what if they're needed right away? That has, we're not waiting 11 months.
Yeah, on that point, I will say on the 140, we didn't throw that one around a lot. If we bring it back to the board, that will be at the July meeting.
Next
Because
month.
So you need them right away.
that would, yeah, as soon as the budget's approved, we're getting a quote again and bringing that to you. If we had to bring it back, so it'd either be the third week of July or the first week of July. That's the option, because we got to have this done by October of '24.
What I'm used to, regardless of signature value, you've got a signature value that applies to capital, applies to everything, and then you bring it, anything above that, you bring in for approval. That's just what I'm used to
So
seeing.
what kind of threshold are you in your head?
We already have 25 as a
Right.
threshold, so I would say we followed that. that's what we're doing for projects. I mean,
Right.
cause, you know, playing devil's advocate, we approved $8 million for repair and infrastructure. So why bring any construction project to us? I mean, we gave you $8 million for, and part of the budget.
Well, to that point, that's because those are commission designated reserves, not operating funds. But I mean, yeah, we can bring it either way. There's obviously advantages to the board of reviewing these things and make sure you're still in agreement with purchasing these items from a flexibility standpoint. Yeah, okay, maybe the last couple of years, it's been a challenge, you know, just because of availability. Sometimes you got to jump on them immediately. But of course, we're not typically in that sort of shortage of vehicles either. So that's a extraneous circumstance that was a significant issue the last couple of years.
You know, in the long term, I personally think we ought to look at our capital a little differently, because, I mean, this is way low on our capital. I mean, you know, all our other capital is coming out of reserves, but it's still capital. I think we probably ought to look at those a little more, you know, bucketized, for lack of a better term. Because that's not a lot of capital for a utility our size. And the reality is, it's not all our capital. The majority of our capital is going into plants, it's going into pumping stations, it's going into,
Right.
et cetera. Now, we're saying that's coming out of the reserve bucket, but it's still capital.
Right.
And you're bringing those to us in real time to get approved, which is all I'm trying to say is a line between processor. Well, does this die where it stands, or do we have a motion?
I'm not making a motion.
Well, I think I'd like to ask the procedure to make a motion with a higher threshold. So, does that need to be done next month, or?
The higher threshold than the 5,000 or the,
I think we take it up to 20 or 25,000.
okay. We could certainly bring it back to you next month with that. Just the reason it's 5,000 is because that's our accounting definition of a capital purchase.
Well, would it be acceptable to make a motion to accept this with the change to have the threshold for capital that comes back to be at 25,000?
Sure. We can do that.
That way we're not kicking it down the road.
Right, sure.
All right, I'll make that motion that the Finance Committee recommend the full commission approve the amended JWSC purchasing policy with a maximum threshold of $25,000.
Is that a minimum? Is it a minimum or a maximum?
Be a minimum
Has to be
threshold.
over.
If it's over
25.
25, it'd be a minimum threshold.
Minimum.
I understand what you were trying to do.
Is there a second? I will second it. Any further discussion?
I just want to say that, you know, this compels additional layer of delay on things, and I'm really not comfortable with doing this at all. I mean, I understand you change the threshold, but I think, I don't know, in the private sector, the budgeting may be different than in public sector, but in something like utility here, there is a huge amount of planning and prioritizing that goes on when the budget goes on. And if you ever would sit in with the budget committee, you would probably have a different perspective about how fine-tuned it is, how much effort goes in, because, you know, there are things that are priorities that your engineering staff could tell you right away. I think it's very different from a private sector at all. And I think that we're ignoring that and thinking that the budget may not be valid 6 months from now or 11 months from now. And I still think it is. I think the things that are selected there are very valid and very necessary. And I think we're just adding a layer of complexity here that's unnecessary, completely unnecessary. And it tends to usurp some of the authority we've given to our director. And I'm not real comfortable with it.
Any further discussion? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries 2-1. And that motion is just to recommend to the full commission, so
Correct.
discuss that tomorrow. Can we amend the document by tomorrow to reflect?
Sure.
Commissioner Watson, sorry, the amended motion. All right, Mr. Burrows, fiscal year 2024 employee raise proposal.
Yes, sir. In years prior to fiscal year 2023, we had structured our potential employee raises to have a cost of living adjustment consistent with the increase in CPI and the ability to achieve a merit raise above that to a combined maximum amount of 5% for the year. Fiscal year '23, the commission was very gracious and approved a cost of living adjustment of 6.88% for hourly staff members due to the substantial increase in the CPI. We did not allow merit increases above that amount because it was above 5%. Salaried staff members received a COLA of 3.44 last year, and they still had the ability to achieve a merit increase up to the combined 5% based off the annual performance review. This year's budget approval last month, we included a 2.5% wage increase in there. And we discussed bringing back to you for your consideration how we were going to structure employee raises. Previous years, the employee raise proposal was approved as a portion of the budget. So looking at all the options with the 2.5% and some discussion with the commission, the staff has felt the most prudent choice for next year is to provide both the hourly and salaried staff a 2.5% cost of living adjustment July 1st. The total wage increase based off of the current wages is $182,452.26, with the average increase being 65 cents per hour.
Thank you, Mr. Burrows. Do we have a motion?
I'll move that the Finance Committee recommend the full commission approve a 2.5% cost of living adjustment to employee wages effective July 1st, 2023.
I'll second the motion.
Just- Yeah, I'm sorry, I was looking at the thing, one of the line, your motion's correct, one of the line above it said 24.
Oh, yes, my apologies.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it just confused me for a second, I was like, wait, okay, but the motion was correct, I apologize for pausing there. Okay, we have a motion and a second, any discussion? Mr. Burrows, where was it at here? The 2024 thing threw me off. Oh, so July 1st, 2023, that's a Saturday, what's our pay periods?
That's the beginning day of the fiscal year.
Okay, my only concern is with the motion saying effective July 21st.
July 1st,
July
yeah.
1st, that.
There will be, yes, that will span.
To say that the wage could go into effect July 1st, and normally wages go into effect at the beginning of a pay period.
Well, the pay period, so it would be, I'll have to look at the calendar, but typically, I believe this year that would be, yes, 1 week would be, of that pay period would be on the old wage scale, and the new one, and the second week of the pay period would be on the new wage scale.
So in the interest of clarity, I mean, does our motion need to say the first pay period after the fiscal year, July 1st, or are you comfortable with it where it stands now?
I'm comfortable where it stands now. That's if the commission wants to wait the whole pay period.
Just
It's,
asking,
from the payroll perspective, it's just put the dates in and it calculates it for you.
Can you do that? You
Yes.
can do that in the middle of pay period?
Middle of a pay period, we can do that. We've done it in the past, so
Okay.
it's doable.
Well, if you can do it in the middle of pay period, then it's a moot point.
Teamwork Services does.
Yeah, Teamwork Services, we got a contractor that takes care of all that for us.
Ours is a challenge to do anything mid-pay
Yeah.
period. Just-
Understood.
I do appreciate the concern for minimizing the stress and difficulty on the finance and accounting staff.
So we literally will have an employee who's 4 or 5 days of the pay period, they'll be at this rate, and then the next 6 days of the pay period, they'll be at this rate.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, any other discussion? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Motion carries 3-0. Discussion item, financial statements, Ms. Wilson.
Ms. Wilson's not here, so Mr. Owens is gonna fill in today.
Okay.
Expresses her apologies.
I'll just confuse me again, that's all.
Yes. Well, as of Friday, when we sent the agenda out, she was planning on being here.
It's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely things come up, and we may not have Francis with us for a few days, but hopefully everything will go
Things
on.
change, and we need to be willing to be nimble.
But yes, what we have here before us is the financial results as of April 30th, 2023. Page 1, starting with the balance sheet, current assets. It was noted that our cash and cash equivalents decreased this month, basically due to project spending. There were draw requests entered for both bonds and GFA funding sources, and those requests were fulfilled and the funds received in May. Let's see, the prepaid expense balance, that increased in the course of the month due to annual insurance payments. Insurance, I believe, was an item we had actually discussed at last month's meeting because of the increases to insurance. See, trustees held funds balanced, decreased, of course, due to the draw requests. Construction in progress totaled $24,888,000, not $598 for ongoing projects. The breakdown of the long-term portion of the GFA loans was $13,072,300 CW, $9,407,900 DW. Short-term GFA loans payable was at $10,480. And year-to-date, we have $495,150 in loan forgiveness. Let's see. Page 2, which restricted funds for debt service. The balance has been decreasing, and we expect that balance to continue to drop as ongoing projects progress. We also have a principal payment scheduled in June. Let's see, I believe your bond sinking fund principal payment for 6/1/23, $2,145,000. Page 3. We get to our breakdown of revenues and expenses. Revenues being flexed as we've been doing each month this year, showing sewer, water, debt charges, and administration at 82.5%, 81.68%, 83.83%, 83.86%. That's flexing the budget numbers. The actual numbers are, of course, what we've taken in year to date. So our revenue as of April 30th, $30,431,000, which is $1.9 million above current budget expectations. Operating revenues showing at excuse me, $1,900,000, or forgive me. My notes a little mixed. Yes. See, sewer revenues were up by operating revenues, which currently stands at the positive variance of $1,943,000. If we look at revenues versus this time last year, sewer revenue is up by $585,800. Water revenues up by $974,400, and interest income up by $360,000. Net operating revenue, currently, the way that the budget is flexed, we see net operating revenue or loss before capital fees. With the flexing of the budget, that shows as a negative $358,498 budgeted versus actual of a positive $1,297,000. Oh, excuse me. Yes, before the purchase orders are figured in. After purchase orders are figured in, a negative $59,000 is our net loss before capital fees. So we're almost $300,000 better than the budgeted number on that item. Capital fees, of course, those are not budgeted. Capital fees year to date, $1,918,000. And final net revenue is coming in at $1,859,732. Next page, page 4, is essentially the same information with the breakdown of expenses by department. We notice that one of the standouts, of course, is wastewater treatment, showing very high costs year to date, largely due to increases we've seen in chemical costs. Moving along to page 5, we get into cash. And with regards to cash, we have We have, of course, been transferring our banking services to Synovus. Currently, I would say 95% of all of our overnight and investment cash is held at Synovus. So that's excluding the trustee-held funds, which are in the neighborhood of $13–14 million. In the course of April, our investment balances ended up at a market value of $50,869,000. We have been moving more of our funds into the money market. The money market is currently yielding 4.9%. The changes in our total portfolio, the total investment portfolio at the end of March, our income was a yield of 2.83%. That has increased to 2.98%, so 15 basis point increase since March on the yield of the portfolio. So right now we have, yes. Oh, other April activity of note on the investment portfolio, $65,000 in interest received, $14,600 in dividends received, fair market value increase on securities held of $67,000, and only $4,200 in fees on those investment accounts. Moving to page 6, is it? No, 7, sorry, page 7. Let's see, this is the project cost report showing total project expenses life to date for the current projects of $24,888,598. See, $15,200 is the meter project. $9,654,400 is all other projects. We currently have see, $11,955,279 total on capitalized projects. Of that, $1,150,000 was spent this year. And you can see when those projects were capitalized. Versus the capital fees year to date by district, which is the bottom of page 8. We see deposits totaling $1,918,825 for this fiscal year.
We have a lot of discussion in here and in public places about development on St. Simons. If you look at those numbers, there's a whole lot more development going on in the North Mainland right now than anywhere else. So if you haven't ventured out to Highway 99, go take a drive. And you'll see a lot of new building going up out there.
There is.
Speaking of that, do you have anything else, Mr.
No.
Thank you. Great presentation. Thank you. Speaking of that, I meant to ask in facilities and forgot, and I guess that's quasi-finance related as well, but all the plans that the county has with, excuse me, with the entrance to the island and with potential changes to Sea Island Road and the bridges and all, are we ahead of having conversation with them about how that affects our infrastructure, and are we
Yes, sir.
budgeting for that and being ready for anything that's gonna have us costs?
The traditional approach we have made is if we are improving the assets, i.e. changing sizing of assets, if we got a 12-inch line and we wanna go to an 18-inch line, for example, we pay for that. But if it's just being relocated due to the roadway improvements, the county pays to relocate the assets. So we have been involved with those discussions, particularly on the Sea Island Frederica. They're still, my understanding, last conversation we had, they're still trying to finalize the location. And until they finalize the location, it's kind of hard for us to really provide a lot of input, because if they change the location, then the way we're gonna route it changes everything.
Sure, I mean, and I realize ours is a small piece of that, but it is a piece of the puzzle.
Right.
It could-
So
it
we
could
are
influence.
involved 100% in this conversation.
What about like the bridge that's moving, that, that might get added on Sea Island Road or there at Hawkins Island? Is that gonna affect our property at all? I mean, are they gonna have to take any of our property? in
It's
order
not going to
land it?
impact our property. It's going to impact that HDPE force main that comes from Stranger Cemetery Road back into the backside of the plant. And GDOT does not pay to relocate assets, so we will have to pay for that.
So
There-
from a budget perspective, is that in our budget this year?
It's not yet because we haven't got the total of what all is gonna have to be moved, because they're still finalizing their plans.
We're just being flexible and
We're
having,
working with them to, discuss whether they'll let us attach the force main to the bridge instead of having to go back underneath the river.
makes sense.
One of those is much more cost effective.
Sounds good. Mr. Burrs, do you have anything for us?
That's all I got today, sir.
Commissioner Cook, Commissioner Cook?
What was the update on the meter numbers, on the meter replacement? Do you,
121.7.
Sorry, I had it for the facilities committee.
oh, I'm sorry, it went past my head, I just wanted to,
21,648.
are replaced already.
Assuming we got more done yesterday than that.
Right. So they're really moving along on that,
Yes, sir.
okay.
Getting a couple hundred a week now, and then that number has increased as they've been able to allocate more resources our way.
Great.
I was looking at that earlier, I think, since they got fully staffed back up, we've been averaging 245.
Something like that, yes, sir.
That's amazing. That's great. Okay.
Getting into some of the older infrastructure, so
More challenging.
a little more challenging for them right now.
Anything else before the commission?
Nothing.
We have a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
All those in favor?